and then we go to Maribel and Jorge, who will be discussing first what they're doing in their ISCs and how heritage and sustainable development is coming. Maribel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Gabriel. Maribel, I think you have your microphone off.
Okay, yes, sorry. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, not yet full screen, but we can see it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. My name is Maribel Beas, and Jorge and I are going to present a little bit of the work that we are doing with our colleagues at the ICOMOS-ISCEAH, the International Scientific Committee of Earthen Architectural Heritage, and how we are trying to discuss and how the Sustainable Development Goals can be used or allocated in or relate to our Earthen architectural heritage in the world. We're going to try to keep this presentation to about 20 minutes, the allocated 20 minutes. Hopefully we're going to reach that goal. So, let me see this presentation. Okay. So, okay. Our scientific committee, the ICOMOS International Scientific Committee of Earthen Architectural Heritage, researches and promotes the understanding, protection, conservation, and management of the Earthen architectural heritage, defined by the committee as the architectural, archaeological, and cultural landscape heritage constructed of unfired clay soil-based material. There's a lot of different construction technologies in this huge universe of unfired clay soil-based materials. That you might see some of them in our slides. The objectives of the scientific program of ISCEAH are focused on the following broad themes: in use, that is conserving and studying the standing and perhaps in use architectural heritage; that archaeology, conserving and studying the Earthen archaeological environment; technology, landscapes, and seismic. A little bit about me, and then I'll leave Jorge to continue with the presentation. I am an architect with a master's degree in historic preservation and an advanced certificate in conservation from the University of Pennsylvania. At the moment, I am a PhD candidate in tourism studies from the University of San Martin in Lima, Peru. I'm also an architectural conservator in private practice in Lima, Peru, and in the US, and a board member of ICOMOS-ISCEAH. Jorge, you can please continue.
Thank you, Maribel. I am an architect from Argentina. That's a brief introduction. But I have been working from social anthropology and geography to link with the work with several indigenous communities in the north of Argentina. I'm a researcher of the National Scientific Council in the country. Yes, I'm a member of ISCEAH and SIAB also. Next, Maribel, please. Sorry.
Not going working. I don't know why it's not working. Okay.
Okay. Just to start with some key topics around Earthen architecture and how this heritage is useful to think and to achieve the SDGs. First of all, Earthen heritage needs to be understood as an emergent from historically modeled relationships between societies and the environment, and which is based also on culturally defined conceptions. The techniques used in this heritage tend to contribute to the development of comfortable and safe habitat with sustainable responses to different social and environmental contexts. One of the characteristics of Earthen heritage is the low environmental impact and the high level of recovery and reuse capacity, which reduce waste. The use of local materials also strengthens the sustainable and autonomous development of communities. And finally, Earthen architectural heritage is embedded in network of collaborative relationships among different actors, encouraging interconnection within communities. So Earthen heritage is not just a way to achieve the SDGs, but we think is a path to rethink the concept of development itself and try and think about more radical changes in a global scale. We have been discussing with several members of ISCEAH around the SDGs before our integration to the group, and we are going to go through some of the goals with some points, very brief. You can look at the presentation later. But in relation to the number one about the reduction of poverty, Earthen heritage is inseparable from the sustainability of local production dynamics, including architecture, but going beyond it. So it favors the improvement of people living conditions. About goal number 3, it's perfectly known that earthen constructions provide favorable conditions for the families and for the communities related to the excellent thermal properties, which favor the well-being of the occupants. In relation to education, goal number 4, it is necessary to understand that the practices involved in earthen heritage are part of traditions which requires the transfer of this knowledge from generation to generation, which is fundamental for the community's educational development. In relation to gender equality or a gender perspective, it is very interesting to observe how different vernacular communities involved in this earthen heritage shows different ways of integrating men and women in more symmetrical relationships. Of course, in relation to goal number 7 about affordable and clean energy, earthen extractions shows different ways to think to reduce the consumption of energy in relation to the thermal capacities of the building, reducing the energy demand for heating and cooling. About decent work and economic growth, the collaborative work associated with earthen construction and the use of local materials from the same sites favor both work within the communities and the development of local networks. Next, Maribel, please. Sorry. About innovation, it is important to see that to work about traditions, it doesn't mean to think about static practices. So earthen heritage shows a continuous process of transformation and innovation with the same techniques, changing materials and practices, adapting them to new contexts. The way in which, around goal number 10, the way in which earthen heritage is integrated in local networks between subject and object in the dynamic conceptions shows how it is possible to build symmetrical relationships around communities, and how earthen materials bring a more democratic access to the possibilities of a better habitat. Considering goal number 11, these sites, most of them shows the possibility of sustainable strategies, both in urban and rural areas, with a balanced use of available resources. Of course, as I have said, the use of local materials which are obtained on the same sites and are processed by the same communities shows a way for a more responsible consumption of the resources of the planet and the places, of course. Goal number 13, again, bring us to the low impact of earthen materials in a context where the building industry is one of the most important in the transformation of the climate of the world. And finally, we would like to insist on how this heritage needs to be understood in the networks, in the complex networks of relationships at local and regional level of different communities, and how the production of this heritage favor the collaboration among people and communities. We would like to go through very briefly different cases of earthen sites around the world, most of them provided by different ISCEAH members. The first one is Quebrada de Humahuaca in the north of Argentina, which is a World Heritage Site since 2003. It's impossible to go to the complexity of this place, but in this context, it's interesting to observe that earthen techniques don't just have a long history on the area, but are present, these techniques, on the more than the 80% of the contemporary constructions of the local habitat. These techniques are indissociable from agricultural practices, from the relation between different domestic units in the production of the materials like the adobe, and the ways of obtaining the different raw materials used through the symmetrical relationships between different communities at the regional level. Maribel is going to continue with the rest of the examples.
Okay, this is in Peru, Chanchan archaeological site. There are many sites in Peru that have that are made of earthen architecture, and this is just one example because I can mention Quipan, Tucumé, Huaca de la Luna, El Brujo, Batán Grande. Just among them, actually, this is one of the topic of my dissertation for my PhD. I'm trying to see how archaeological sites and SDG can be combined, and how we can work with the SDGs on architectural sites. Chanchan was the largest pre-Columbian city in South America. It's near Trujillo in the northern coast of Peru, and was the seat of the ancient Chimu civilization before it fell to the Inca Empire. It's a vast adobe complex and has citadels, temples, plazas, and cemeteries. In the region around Chanchan, extensive agricultural areas are sustained intricate 80-kilometer-long irrigation system that survives the Chimu times. So that is one of that can be linked to one of our SDGs. As community participation in the conservation and protection of these sites increases, they have an increased opportunity to participate in the economic advantages of tourism. And we are trying to also link how identity, you see those children identifying or seeing their symbols, and how they can participate and be part of the archaeological sites, and see how they feel, and try to get the community involved in the sites, not just see them as a site that is dead, but as some part of the community, and actively participate in that. Reduce inequalities, increase community participation in decision making, identity construction, and reinforcement are valuable tools for quality education and sustainable community development. About Egypt, this is my The Dr. Marwa Dabaye is working with the communities in the Balad village through participatory action research to help save the future of the currently deteriorating vernacular architecture. The vernacular architecture is suffering all over the world, and Egypt is one of the countries where the desert vernacular architecture is facing one of the greatest risks of disappearance. To prevent further loss of traditional knowledge and to encourage vernacular know-how in becoming a living part of the future of building practices. In many parts of the world, there is a different, those traditions, as I think Ege was mentioning, that men are the ones in charge of the construction and women are part of the finishes and the decoration of the exterior, and this in Egypt is one of them, but that happens in Africa and in many places. So that is a little bit in gender equality. One is traditionally one is in charge of one part of the construction, and the other one is the other gender is in part of the other construction. In China, we were lucky to be in Pingyao in September of 2019 before the entire pandemic happened. There was a CIAF and ICCEAH joint annual meeting, is the International Conference on Vernacular Architecture and Earthen Architecture towards local development. And it was hosted in Pingyao, and we had the chance to visit this fabulous city, and their exterior wall is a walled city, and the entire wall has parts of earthen architecture. So Professor Xiao Yong is the one who is working on this site. They're working really very strongly with the SDGs and with the communities on how to create a better understanding of the city. The ancient city of Pingyao is an exceptional, well-preserved example of traditional Han Chinese city founded in the 14th century. Its urban fabric shows the evolution of architectural styles and town planning in Imperial China over 5 centuries. In November of 2015, the UNESCO published a policy document for the integration of sustainable development into the process of the World Heritage Convention, which put forward the path of the World Heritage to achieve SDGs. Pingyao is an urban area with integrated functions of culture, tourism, and habitat. A cultural ancient city in livable World Heritage site, developing a new cultural industry besides visiting tourists. And last but not least, this site in New Zealand, architect Ian Baum is the one who sent us this information. And after an 7.8 magnitude earthquake that struck Kaikoura on the east coast of South Island of New Zealand. The displacement from the earthquake that was up to 12 meters caused an extensive damage. 3 of the listed historic sites, COP buildings, were in very remote locations, were near the epicenter and were damaged, and the owners had contemplated demolishing them. The architect Ian Bowman worked with the community to recover the construction practices associated with the use of raw material, revitalizing the community's local knowledge, and ensuring that these historic buildings can continue to be used and enjoyed by current and future generations, rather than demolished and lost in losing the significant history of each of the buildings. Also, earthen construction is based on local materials obtained. Wait, I don't know what happened here. Okay, sorry. Earthen construction is based on the use of local materials obtained and processed by the community. This material is easily reusable, allowing very little waste. The buildings are now used by the community. 2 are museum-type buildings that demonstrate the use of earthen construction, and possibly by retaining them, they may encourage new buildings using the same building techniques. So this is also work with the communities, replacing something or restoring sites that were historic and they used in responsible consumption. Some of our goals and the challenges: to increase active participation of local actors, stakeholders in debates on heritage conservation, allowing a balanced exchange of knowledge; to reduce the effects of mass tourism in sites, avoiding transformation processes that increase social inequalities; to preserve local construction traditions and the transmission of technical knowledge between generations as part of the heritage policy, to develop comprehensive approaches that recognize heritage within its social and cultural production and sustainability frameworks, including social issues in the debates, to encourage diverse nations to protect and recognize the historic values associated with earthen construction, and to design coherent and compatible technological solutions for the consolidation of our earthen architecture. That is it. If you have any questions, I think they're going to be for the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maribel. So yes, we will have the questions at the end, but I really just wanted to say thank you that you've captured other points from your other members, because you provided different case studies that are showing the complexities of different earthen architecture from different places. So thank you very much. Let's go to Silvia quickly, and if everyone has 15 minutes or so that we can hear her and we can have a discussion. Thank you. There you have the floor.
Hi, hi everyone. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which part of the world are you. I'm sharing my screen. Thank you first for the opportunity to the SDGs working group. It's been a really nice meeting, and I have a lot of ideas right now. And thank you especially to Gabriel Caballero for all his work. I'm going to talk to you about ICOMOS Panama, the Sustainable Development Goals. And I am also going to show you a case study I am currently working on. It is actually also traditional earthen architecture. And English is not my mother tongue. I will apologize for any mistakes. I'm going to read. And well, I will begin by talking a little bit about myself. I'm an architect. I have a master's in heritage preservation, a master's in world heritage, and a PhD in architecture. And I currently work as a professor at Universidad de Panama, and I'm part of the national research system also. I'm currently ICOMOS Panama president, and first I was working as a secretary, and now I'm working as the president. And we had national committee since 1989. Here's Panama. We have around 4 million inhabitants, and we are rather small. We have only 20 members in the national committee. We have 3 World Heritage natural sites, and we have 2 World Heritage cultural sites that you can see on the slide. The fortifications of the Caribbean in the Atlantic, and the archaeological site of Panama Viejo and the historic district of Panama to the Pacific. And you can see marked with a circle the region of Azuero, the case study I will be presenting later. Why did I got interested in the relationship between heritage and sustainability? Well, in 2019, I organized a seminar called Conservation of Heritage Sites in Tropical Humid Environments with colleagues from Italy and Colombia. And the conclusions were all driven to the link between heritage, sustainability, and climate change. I decided to learn more. And in 2020, with the pandemics, I participated in a virtual course organized by ICOMOS Argentina about climate change and risk assessment. Although neither of the courses were directly involved with the SDGs, the relationship was clear, and I knew that it was important to start discussing about heritage, sustainability, climate change, and the SDGs in the National Committee. 2020 and 2021 have been difficult because of the pandemic, but nevertheless, the National Committee was focused on its objective: conservation and dissemination of cultural heritage through capacity building and using the social networks, and slowly directing it towards sustainability and the SDGs. For 2 years in a row, to celebrate the International Day of Monuments and Sites, We filled our social networks with monuments and sites, national and international, related to the themes of the IDMS in response to the confinement situation due to the pandemic. This was organized by our secretary, Mirta Linero Baroni, in alliance with the Ibero-American Colonial Urbanism Research Network. We also organized a couple of seminars. One, examples of urban and architectural models for pandemics or sickness, that gave examples of urban and architectural models in the history of cities or towns in the Latin American region that today are presented as examples of good practices for the pandemics. The webinar included the participation of several international researchers and experts from Universidad de Panamá, Universidad Externado de Colombia, and Pontificia Universidad Javeriana. This was part of the ICOMOS webinar series and organized by the help of ICOMOS Latin America. Also, we did another one called Heritage and Pandemics, presented different responses to both cultural and, of both cultural and natural institutions to the pandemic, including both public, private, and mixed organization, and was organized also by another member, Rebeca Somoza de Burgos, in collaboration with Patronato Panamá Viejo, Ministerio de Cultura, Parque Natural Metropolitano, and Museo de la Memoria Histórica de Río Hato. The other was Fort Clayton, Complex Past, Diverse Future, and the objective of this webinar was to explore the past, present, and future of this architectural complex. It was carried out as part of the activities of the celebration of the International Day of Monumental Sites 2021, with the theme Complex Past and Diverse Futures, organized by our member Graciela Rosemena in collaboration with the City of Knowledge Foundation. As you can see, the activities are related somewhat to the SDGs 3, 5, 10, 11, 15, and 16. Right now, encouraged by the call for inputs from the national committees to the ICOMOS Triennial Scientific Plan, we decided to focus on the acknowledgement of the relationship between heritage, sustainability, climate change, and the SDGs. For that, we have created a smaller informal group of members that we hope to develop into a national working group to share experience and encourage the capacity building through webinars related to heritage, sustainability, climate change, and the SDGs. We hope to organize at least one seminar on this subject before the year's end, and hope that we can we hope that we can have the help of this working group to organize something. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you about, I'm going to share the case study that I am currently researching. As you all know, the document Future of Our Past encourages the use of traditional knowledge, techniques, construction methods and material, and traditional land use, among others, because of its adaptability and resilience. The case study I am presenting is about a traditional urbanism and architecture in the Azuero region, west of Panama City, as you saw in the beginning on the map. The Azuero region is formed by towns that once were pre-Hispanic settlements and during the conquest and colonization were inhabited by Spaniards. These settlements, nowadays known as pueblos, present certain characteristics such as a central square, ordered streets, which do not necessarily form a grid, designed according to the winds, and houses have wide portals to protect them from the rain and from the sun. This is an example. This is a town called Parita. The historic center of Parita was founded in the mid-16th century and is the Azuero site that has best preserved this traditional urbanism and architecture. Its colonial church and plaza are surrounded by houses with portals and constitute a unique complex. You can see here that the Spanish architecture came to America from Spain and was adapted to the new conditions. And the traditional Panamanian architecture is a result of these different influences from colonial architecture, either churches and houses, Spanish architecture, that it's a mix or it comes from the Islamic and the Roman houses, and indigenous architecture too. You can see also that the constructive material of this architecture is called quincha, and it's a mud or earth supported by a wooden structure. Here you can see the wooden structure, and you can see the master builder working on the structure. Here you can see that this traditional architecture maintains, for example, the colonial measures, the colonial names, and the colonial the same design of structure. The interesting part is that each house is built through a cooperative process called Junta de Embarre, which has the participation of all the community. This is a mud board or a mud meeting, and unfortunately, the number of quincha constructions are decreasing. The traditional Panamanian architecture is being lost, and it is important to recover its values. They represent the know-how or savoir-faire, the traditions transferred through the parents, to their children, to the teacher, from the teacher to the disciple, as you see here. Traditional urbanism and architecture are based on portals. These become the most important spaces in Azuero traditional home. The measurements of the portals and the way they are used actually help to maintain the physical distancing during the pandemics, and it is even possible to start a conversation with the neighbor without breaking the physical distancing, as you can see here. To the date, actually, the province of Los Santos, which is part of the Azuero region, maintains mainly the design and the measures of its traditional urbanism and architecture. And it is currently the third province with the least number of COVID-19 cases, only after, of course, the influences of the indigenous communities. As you can see, the traditional urbanism and architecture relates to SDGs 3, 5, 10, 11, 15, and 16, and a couple more that our colleagues mentioned. So I finish here. It is important to look at our past and our heritage, and without imitating or copying it, to have it as reference, and have it as reference the know-how or savoir-faire of our ancestors to solve the current problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Silvia. I think it is also quite interesting how the traditional architecture, it's also involving the communities that are to build this kind of architecture, right? Okay, does anyone have a question for Silvia? I have a question for both, but does anyone have a question for Maribel, Silvia, or Jorge for their presentations? Okay, so I think I will ask a question for Maribel and Jorge first. I've asked a question on climate change, but in terms of use of new materials in earthen architecture, and there's an SDG that is relation to innovations and of innovations of materials. Are there any types of, let's say, materials that are now combining both earthen architecture and more structural approaches to restore a building?
Yes, Gabriel, it's a good question. I already answered on the chat. I would like to say first that there have been history many initiatives to improve the capacities of earthen architecture using incompatible materials. Most of our earthen sites have been intervened with cement, concrete, and trying to make this architecture eternal. As you finish the intervention and the building is finished. I think we need to change our perspective on temporality of architecture. Most of the communities where Maribel works and myself also, through their social relations, they intervene constantly on the buildings, changing the plasters, repairing the roof. And these are not just technical instances to sustain the building, but they are very important social and ritual moments. And sometimes when we try to increase the durability of the constructions, we are transforming deep cultural meanings associated with the participation of the communities in the buildings. Anyway, there are many researches around how to improve these capacities, but which is interesting is that the case of Peru is very interesting in relation to seismic activity and how the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Peru is studying many pre-Hispanic sites, including Chan Chan, the site which Maribel spoke about, trying to understand how these indigenous communities have some development around the structural strategies. And now we are learning from this heritage to use these practices in the contemporary architecture.
Great.
I want to add something else. For archaeological sites, what we're doing is trying to improve the way the water runs away from the buildings, like cleaning old or areas that were rivers, and trying to figure out how to make sure because there are more intense rains in some areas. Also, what Jorge mentioned, the Universidad Católica, and they have done ways, they have done a lot of research on ways to reinforce the structures for seismic areas, but not through putting concrete or cement, but by doing maybe cords or cording it around, or putting small bamboos around and making it more structure stable, just for in case of an earthquake, the structure stays up a little bit longer, so it doesn't fall on the people, and they give them a chance to get out of the building in case that this whole structure is going to fall on that down. And also another research from the Universidad Católica is how to make the buildings more better to keep the climate change, for the more cold areas in the Andes, or the areas are getting colder. So putting more air in between, and some construction techniques that have more allow more air in between the walls, so that it's warmer inside and the heat doesn't go out that quickly. So there is some research going on there, but not for historic buildings. A lot for new buildings made of earth, because the historic buildings, it's not good to put new materials or incompatible materials. They will fall quicker, like Jorge said.
Thanks. I think I wanted to extend the same question to Silvia, because I think you also use earthen architecture in the presentation that you had. So is there any, let's say, with the advent of new technology in Panama, is there any guidance that ICOMOS Panama provides in terms of how new methodologies can be applied, or what are the appropriate methodologies that can be done for the heritage?
Yes, thank you. Well, right now there is not definitely a law or a specific document, but we are working. Actually, we are working with the Colegio de Arquitectos, the architectural group of the Society of Architects, and we actually would like to include the earthen architecture in the documents of the to have it as a calculated structure, and to present how to repair or restore this kind of a structure. Actually, I hope this research, that is a personal research of mine, I hope to get funds also to document and to encourage the people to know how to conserve these houses, because right now people think that these houses actually have no value, and want to change to a house with cement blocks and more modern and contemporary elements.
Thank you. I think right now we're out of time, but I do hope that at least Silvia, Maribel, and Jorge, you can also discuss, because this is like very, very similar presentations. And I know that most of the time our conversations in the first part are also very, very intense. And thanks for everyone for those ones who stayed behind. And thank you for your presentation. It is, for me, it is very much wonderful, and I do appreciate that you've taken the time. So see you again on the 8th of July. We will be having the strategic planning meeting. A lot more heavier topics to discuss, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone. Thank you very much. Yeah. Have a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Yeah. Goodbye.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
See you all.